Hello everyone, my name is Huayu She and we are Group H. Today, I will talk about how an Australian company could enter the Chinese market. Our presentation will have 4 parts. First, I will look at Chinese political, economic, and legal challenge. Second, Xintian Ma will explain the key criteria to consider when entering into the Chinese market. Third, Kang Long will analyze the cultural distance between China and Australia. Finally, Yu Junzhou will discuss China's industry specialization in international trade. So, let's begin with the part 1. I will start with the background, then move on to China's political economic, which includes the political, economic, and legal system, and finish with 4 main legal challenges. Now we can come to the background of the China. So in globalization is the accelerating integration of markets and institutes worldwide. For China, WTO accession in 2001 was a turning point. Trade and FDI surged and its political, economic, and legal system evolved rapidly. Yet this system remained very different from Australia's. For Australia firms, the biggest challenge is managing a legal environment that is less predictable and less transparent than at home. Now let's go to political system. China is a one-party system where government dominates. This provides stability, but politics can shift quickly to meet political goals. Australia, by contrast, is a multi-party democracy, slower in decision-making, but more transparent. For firms, China offers strong state support in sectors like infrastructure and renewable energy, but concentrated power raises risk when politics change abruptly. Let's go to the next part. Economic system. China runs a mixed economic. Market and FDI drive upgrading, but SOEs dominate energy, finance, and high-tech knowledge. Australia is a labor market economic with minimal state intervention. For Australia firms, this means that while China's market is vast, they must adapt to policy-led priority, not just market demand. Let's go to the legal system part. China is civil law system, features detailed code but weakened judicial independence, and enforcement via regionally. Reforms in IP and contract law show progress, yet outcome remain inconsistency. Australia is common law, but by contrast rely on precedent, has strong judicial independence and deliver predictable rulings. A contract enforced with certainty in Australia, but may face uncertainty in China. This table shows key difference between China and Australia. Politically, China's one-party system is stable but unpredictable, while Australia's democracy is slow yet transparent. Economically, China's mixed economic is policy-led, while Australia's labor market is driven by private firms. Legally, China's civil law makes contracts less reliable, while Australia's common law ensures strong enforcement. From here we can see, in politics, we need to strike a balance between stability and the shift. In economics, we need to follow the policy signal. In law, we need to ensure the reliability of the contract. Next, we will discuss the legal challenge that the Australia company may face when they go into the China market. The first challenge is property rights and corruption. China still shows strong state intervention and scores lower on the corruption perception index compared with Australia. Australia, however, have strong property rights and lower corruption. For Australia firms, this implies higher costs and delays, making reliable local partner critical. Let's go to the second challenge, intellectual property. China's IP law align with global standards, but enforcement is weak, and counterfeiting remain common. In Australia, IP protection is strong and strictly enforced. This means Australia firms must protect their innovation early to prevent fast imitation. Let's go to the third challenge, compliance and liability. China has stricter regulation in food, medicine, and consumer goods, but enforcement differs by region. Australia applies consistent and transparent national standard. Australia firms must build strong compliance system or they risk fine and reputational damage. Let's go to the last legal challenge, contract enforcement. In China, courts may favor local firms, and arbitration is often costly and slow. By contrast, Australia provides transparent and reliable enforcement. For Australia firms, this means arbitration costs are essential to reduce legal risk. China's global integration has created huge opportunities, but compared with Australia, it concentrates politics, state-led economic, and uneven legal enforcement raise significant risks. For Australia firms, opportunity and risk coexist. The best strategy is preparation, legal risk assignment, arbitration costs, and strong investment in IP and compliance. In the following part, Xintian Ma will discuss the analysis of the more important criteria to consider when enter into the Chinese market.
Hello, now it's my turn to present my answer to question 2. When Australia company plans to establish business in China, which development indicator is the most important? Firstly, how can we convert development into a business decision? We should pay attention to two types of indicators. The first is economic development. Per capita gross national income, GNI, usually adjusted by purchasing power parity PPP. These indicators show the market size and the purchasing power of consumers, and can initially determine the average level of affluence. Secondly is human development. The Human Development Index, HDI, based on Amartya Sen's capabilities perspective, composed of life expectancy, education level, and income. The components of the HDI also affect the quantity of supply and demand that the enterprise will actually enter. However, what does applying these measurements to China mean? China's income indicator shows that there is a large market with considerable purchasing power. For managers, this means there is a potential for scale, but GNI or PPP cannot tell you which regions the payment ability is stronger. Or does it reveal whether the income is stable, how products can adapt to local preferences, and how to comply with social standards? Therefore, development quality becomes important, and this is precisely what the HDI depicts. Higher life expectancy means fewer absence and more predictability, and the supply of higher education directly affects labor productivity, learning curves, and the ease of technology transfer. Using Porter's diamond model language, strong advanced factors such as skills research not only allow you to find low-cost factors, but also match reliable suppliers and innovative local partners. So if one development indicator must be chosen as the top priority, I will choose HDI. It combines market capacity with capabilities, determining whether you can use qualified labor to complete work according to your standards in the local area, and also determining whether the consumers have the ability to absorb higher value-added products and service. This judgment is supported by data in the Asian experience. A study covering China and Asian economies found that HDI has a causal relationship with foreign direct investment (FDI) in the long term, and infrastructure and economic freedom also play a role. In simple terms, a higher level of human development attracts and remains foreign capital better, because human capital, institutions, and growth will improve over time. Why not choose GNI or PPP as the top indicator? Its key blind spot in the implementation process is crucial. It cannot tell you whether you can quickly find engineers who can work according to your standards, cannot assess whether health shocks will amplify absenteeism in critical quarters. It cannot determine whether the new consumers are willing to shift up a gear without significant local cost. Meanwhile, although I focus on development measurements, the quality of institutions is a key channel to make development investable. National policies are also included in the considerations of foreign investors when searching for the main destination in a specific national group. In our widely used World Governance Indicators (WGI), Rule of Law (RL), and anti-corruption are of crucial importance. The former reflects whether society follows rules and whether contracts can be executed. The latter examines whether public power has been abused. These are also the key factors determining the success or failure of market entry plans. And the evidence shows that clean governance can unleash development dividends. Corruption and state fragility are like adding a tax to high HDI and large markets. A study covering 25 Asian economies and using a two-step system GMM indicates that a corruption-free or more transparent environment can stimulate FDI, while state fragility inhibits investment. Corruption has a significant negative impact on FDI, while stronger state governance capacity and less external intervention will make investors more confident in payment security and policy predictability. My teammate in the first part has explained the transaction cost that Australian investors will encounter in China from the perspective of property rights, corruption, and intellectual property protection. This precisely falls within the governance assessment part of my section. When the rule of law is stronger and corruption is less, intellectual property remedies are more effective, and thus the advantages brought by a high HDI are more likely to ultimately translate into profits. This is also the reason why I insist on using HDI as more important development indicator for whether to enter, but it needs to be combined with governance checks to determine how to enter. So, based on my analysis and the viewpoints of three academic articles, my conclusion is that when assessing whether to implement in China, please consider HDI as a more important measurement standard. It tells you whether the local ecosystem can provide the elements you need and whether the local area can consume the products you provide. And also pay attention to inequality and the informal economy. Then evaluate the governance of China to determine the entry model and risk control. The sequence is consistent with the international business theory we have learned, namely political economy, development measurement, trade theory, and institutions. It also aligns with the Asian evidence. Human development enhances the attractiveness of the market. Government quality ensures the realization of opportunities, and income level tells you the size of the short-term pie. Next, we come to the third section, analyzing the cultural distance between China and Australia.
And today I will analyze the cultural distance between China and Australia using two models. The first one will be Hosford's cultural dimension and Ronan and Senker's cultural cluster. I will then explain if this culture will converge or diverge in the long run. So the first one will be Hosford's dimension, and here's the 5 dimension. Hosford model compare national cultures. The 5 dimensions are power distance, individualism vs collectivism, masculinity and femininity, also the uncertain avoidance, and long vs short-term orientation. Regarding power distance, a high score means strong respect for authority. Australia's medium score shows informality. Thus, Australian companies in China must adapt to more hierarchy and formal relationship. Australia is highly individualism, stressing authority, while China is collectivist, stressing group loyalty and family. This creates difference in negotiation, teamwork, and minor. Uncertainty avoidance is moderate in both, but China builds trust to reduce confusions, where Australians accept risk more easily. Long-term orientation is strong in China due to confusion value. Australians are short-term oriented, seeking quick results, while Chinese prefer sustainable outcomes. Overall, Hosford shows contrast in hierarchy, collectivism, and time horizon. And the next one will be the Ronan and Senker's cluster. Ronan and Senker cluster divided countries into cultural clusters, and here are 2 types. Australia belongs to Anglo group with individualisms, low power distance, and direct communication. China belongs to the Confucian group with collectivism, high context communication, and respect for authority. This confirms Hosford's finding. The two nations sit in very different cultural family, means misunderstanding may occur if subtleties are ignored. The next one will be the diverge and converge. So here is some of the PowerPoints. So convergence, globalization has sped up people in technology flows. Australian company can benefit from raising familiarity with Western practice, English ability, and connectivity. Global company are and brands spread standardized value of efficiency and professionalism. Divergency. China re-emphasized Confucian principle nationalism and cultural uniqueness, diverging from Western standards, especially in politics, and identify Australian keeps its angle traditional of democracy and freedom. In reality, both focus coexist. For business, surface level practice like technology use, English in professional context, and customer performance are converging, but at the deeper value level, hierarchy, collectivism, and long-term orientation, Australia and China remain culturally distant. So next will be the implication for the Australia business. So for Australian business contemplating entering China, awareness of this cultural distance is important. More direct and focused communication strategies that prove successful in Australia can be interpreted as disrespectful in China. Decision making is slower and calls for slower relationship development. Long-term dedication is preferable to short-term as advantage, especially when it comes to Chinese business ambition. So that's all for my part. So next, my groupmates Youjun Zhou will help to introduce the Chinese industry specialization in the international trade.
Hello everyone. Thanks to Joy for presenting the different culture between China and Australia. Now I will answer the first question, an analysis of China's industry specialization in international trade, comparing Adam Smith's absolute advantage and David Ricardo's comparative advantage. First, let me introduce the two theories simply. According to Adam Smith, a country should specialize in goods it can produce more efficiently and lower cost. For example, if a country can produce textiles with fewer resources, it should export textiles. On the other hand, David Ricardo argues that even if a country is more efficient in producing multiple products, it should focus on the industry with the lowest opportunity cost. This is the idea of comparative advantage. Now let's focus on China's industry under two theories. I have chosen emerging manufacturing and textiles for comparison. First, regarding emerging manufacturing, the data and the charts indicate that China has established an absolute global dominance in sectors such as solar PV, batteries, and electric vehicles. Its mass production capacity, integrating supply chains, and strong policy support, such as Made in China 2025, has created high technological barriers and consolidated its leadership. This reflects Smith's absolute advantage, supported by economy of scale, supply chain integration, and government policy. Second, regarding textiles, China has been a global leader for the past 2 decades. However, rising labor and production costs, trade conflicts, the coronavirus impact, and strong competition from Vietnam and India have weakened its advantage. This shows that although China remains dominant, the opportunity cost is high. So, which fits Ricardo's competitive advantage? Based on this analysis, I argue that China should follow Smith's absolute advantage, especially in emerging industries. The reasons are clear. The first is China has strong advantage in these sectors. The second is the government's policies provide strong support. And the third one is the supply chain integration and the mass production ensure global leadership. The last is the technology barriers reduce substitution risk. If China follows Smith's absolute advantage, there will be several potential benefits. The first is the enhanced global influence.
promoting industrial upgrading, and the last is strengthening technology barriers. But at the same time, risk also exists. The first is lower resilience due to overconcentration. The second is rising trade frictions. The third is overcapacity and employment pressure. So foreign's means absolute advantage. China's efficiency is maximized and its global dominance strengthened. But the government must manage the risk of overconcentration and trade conflict. In conclusion, for my question, China's reliance on record comparative advantage in traditional industry is limited. Emerging industries have absolute advantage in scale, supply chains, and policy support. Therefore, China should follow Smith's absolute advantage theory, focus on its strong industries to secure long-term global competitiveness. In conclusion, for our group, China offers huge opportunities but also high risk. Australian firms must prepare for legal and governance challenges, respect cultural differences, and take a long-term view. With China shifting from traditional comparative advantage to absolute strength in new industries, succeed depends on careful risk control and aligning with its development path. Thank you for listening.